You are listening to the FCF Leadership Podcast. This podcast has been created to help you connect and achieve your destiny as a leader. For more information, visit our website at fcf.org.
Give us something that our listeners can take away from this in terms of what would that look like? Like, where would one start?
I love it. It's a great question.
I would like to, because some people may not know that, as you say, they're flaming out.
Yeah.
What would be some, points for people to recognize, like, hey, this might be you needing to deal with this, and then go into what she talked about?
I think an answer to that, Whitney, is learning to be self-aware. So the very first thing is you got to be attuned. Mm-hmm. You got to develop that. And a lot of people have never developed it.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And particularly men. And the reason is because we live in a society which, this is what the professionals call it, it's toxic masculinity.
Yes.
And toxic masculinity is you're not allowed to feel.
Right.
You're not allowed to have emotion. You're not allowed to hurt.
Be a man.
Yeah, be a man, buck it up.
Suck it up.
Be strong. And so we're taught as males to repress what we feel. So whether you are a man or somebody who is a very emotionally given female, this is the first thing, is become attuned to what you're feeling. So there are things like, what am I experiencing in a given situation? What, in that last conversation, when I left it, I felt differently. Why did I feel differently? So you're just tuning into the fact, I felt different. I felt sad. I felt alienated. I felt I wasn't heard. I felt attacked. I felt, for some reason, their personality made me feel unsafe. Or something much worse, whenever I'm with them, I always leave feeling like a chunk of who I am is gone. I feel like a part of my soul has been ripped out of me. Well, we're just becoming attuned. Another thing you can do is become attuned to your physical body. You know, do you find your heart beating faster? Do you find the nerves in your eyes twitching? Do you find your hands sweating more? Being attuned that I'm having reactions here. And incidentally, we have a lot of research today that shows that a person can look calm on the outside, but they can have a firestorm going on the inside.
Right.
Sure.
And so you have to learn to be attuned to you and what is going on the inside. So if you're attuned to what I'm feeling and even my physical reactions, then you begin to drill down. And this is where I love helping people process who they are and what's going on the inside. So anytime you have an emotion, this is what I encourage people to do. Google search emotions wheel.
Really?
It's called an emotions wheel. Google search it. There are a bunch of them. Some of them are bigger than others. And all it is a wheel that gives you the 4 quadrants of basic human emotions. And then it gives a bunch of smaller synonyms for those. And you just look to see, what am I feeling? And it's just an easy way for a person.
Oh my God, I love that. You know, I'm going to print that off and put it on my fridge.
Oh yeah. I've got it saved on my computer because whenever I'm processing things in my daily devotion with the Lord, I go to it quite often.
Oh, I love that.
So every time you have an emotion, every emotion you are feeling, there is a narrative behind it. And so if you're not attuned to it, or you're not practiced or skilled at it yet, which sometimes you got to develop that.
Right.
If you're not skilled at it, you're not even aware that there's a narrative. You're not even, and sometimes even when you're skilled, you got to work at finding out what is the narrative behind this emotion. So is it
that, let me just ask this quickly. Is it just that people don't understand the value of really pressing in and taking the time to make these type of assessments in themselves?
Yes,
Okay.
because they don't understand that assessment is going to ultimately drill all the way down to the root of bitterness.
Wow.
And once we can get down to the root of bitterness, this is where we go with it. Once you get down to the root of bitterness, you can get the lowest level of lie. Where is the lowest level lie? Or what is the thing that's driving all of this? Because this is how you do it. This is the emotion. This is the narrative. So once I get the narrative of the emotion, then I ask, what does that mean? And I get the narrative behind the narrative. Then I ask, what does that mean? I get the narrative under that. Then I get down. And there is a base level, organic, elementary fear that is at the very bottom of it. And then you ask yourself, why do I believe this about me? And this is amazing, just identifying the emotion and just identifying a few of those narratives, even getting down to the very bottom of that fear,
right?
Your brain is already beginning the reprocessing. So you're either going to repress or reprocess. You get to decide. You're going to repress or reprocess. So when you get down to the fear...
So is that why most people tend to repress, because that fear is so real?
Yes. And they don't really know if they can face it and
really
survive.
Deal with it.
Yeah.
Oh, that breaks my heart.
I know. So
really breaks my heart.
So when you get down to the fear, and it can be, something as the base level is often things like, I'm afraid I am not enough. And if I'm not enough, then this next narrative tells me that I'm going to be found out. And if I'm found out, the next narrative is that I won't be included, and everybody will know I'm the fraud that I am. And so when somebody saw me, but they didn't say hi, and they rejected me in that moment, it actually put me into a tailspin of fear and depression, and all of that was tied to, I don't think I'm enough. And so then I have to ask myself the question,
why?
Why do I not think I'm enough? What is that?
Now that takes you on a whole path.
Whole different deal. And that's where you start pulling the hippocampus files out, and you're looking at them and you're reprocessing them. And this is where devotions come alive, because in your devotional time, you invite Jesus into the moment. So you begin to ask yourself, where did the memories, and I'm taking you in I'm sharing a bigger set of items in a short order, but ultimately you get down to where were the traumas in my life that I first began to believe this about me?
Yeah.
When did I first start believing I wasn't enough?
I was just going to ask, does it have to do with age? Are the deepest ones usually the things that happened at a younger age?
A lot of them do.
Or does it even matter? Is it just like any large trauma?
Well, actually, there's a lot there. So we need to know this, we inherit the genetics, brain structure of our parents. So if a parent is developed in their brain neural pathways to anxiety, the very first predisposition is our brain is already wired for anxiety.
Right.
So then when you're born as a baby, and you are being, let's say you're being bottle fed or even breastfed, the way that the baby's eyes connect with the primary caretaker's eyes is actually the eyes of the parent is building the brain's infrastructure in that baby before the baby has a chance to even express or grow or develop. This brain is already being developed, and by the time it's 2 years of age, a great portion of its brain is already predisposed to how it's going to function.
Wow.
So you've got those pieces. Then you've got the fall of Adam that you inherit.
Right.
Then you've got things that were perpetrated on you. Some things were perpetrated on you that were actual perpetrations. There was predatory action. Somebody did something that legitimately was offensive to you. But there are things that happened to us that weren't because the primary caretakers did something.
Right.
It's because we perceived it or interpreted it that way, and our brain said, I don't like the way that feels because I believed that I wasn't being nurtured. Pia Melody, who is a researcher around trauma, she says that trauma is really anything that's not of nurture.
Say that again.
That trauma is really anything that's not of nurture.
Wow.
So if you make, like if I make a bid to you, and I'm leaning towards you, and I'm looking for you to connect with me, but you don't. That turn away from my bid actually opens me up either by my interpretation or by the way it was done to experience even a paper cut trauma. Now you multiply those, and the next thing you know, you're developing your brain survival techniques that when people I care about are around me, when my social construct is around me, when these people are with me, if I bid towards them, and I've got a history of knowing how they're going to respond, they're going to turn away, then I have to decide, am I going to develop neural pathways of anxiety, which now means I either have to be a comedian, I've got to learn tactics to get attention. I'm either going to be a comedian or I'm going to be somebody who is irritable and I'm going to gripe and complain and hit.
I feel like the whole process, though, for us as, especially Word of Faith leaders,
Yes.
Has been one of the word.
Right.
And
Ignore flesh.
Yes.
Emotions are flesh. Ignore flesh. Suppress it.
Instead of addressing and healing. I remember I told this story recently as well, but I remember a young woman who was raised a very sheltered Christian, came to Tulsa. I think she was going to Rhema, I can't remember, but she was going there for Bible school or education of some sort. But she was just barely 18, never been away from home, and had been very sheltered, and started coming to our church. And she had an issue come up, and it was really making her more and more excessively anxious. And so I'd met with her 2 or 3 times, and so I finally said to her, maybe you need to go see a therapist. Yeah. And she was so offended.
Wow.
Why would I do that? Isn't the word enough? And I said, well, do you go to a doctor?
Right. Come on.
And she said, well, yeah. And I said, why do you go to a doctor? Well, because they understand the inner workings of my body, can help me address those things. And I said, well, can't a therapist do the same thing for your mind? And I said, how can you get in faith for something and receive your healing for something if you don't even know what you have to address?
It is so good.
And she just sat there and she goes, oh.
Yeah.
And I said, even people who struggle in their body, we don't deny them medication because they're in faith.
Right.
Deal with the symptoms, deal with what you have to deal with while you grow your faith.
Yeah.
And acclaim what God has already purchased for you, then you can appropriate that because your symptoms aren't so loud in your face and screaming at you on a daily basis. Well, you have to be able to do the same thing with your soul.
Actually, when you think about that pattern where you take the emotion, go to the feelings wheel, you move down the narrative scale, all the way to the bottom of what is the elementary fear, it's not until you get to that elementary fear that you actually can confront it with truth.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's where the word needs to confront that. So we're not giving room to
That's what I love about
emotion.
what you're saying.
Yeah.
It takes away that stigma that we Word of Faith ministers have built of you're just not strong enough in the Word. You're not, become the confession police and, the whole thing. And really, we've broken down the beauty of our faith to some kind of I have to do this. It's about me now and what I do to attain what God has, as opposed to just receiving what He has because I'm understanding what He's made in me, and I can address those things according to the Word or the habits I've developed or the.
So true.
Wow.
So once you get down to that bottom fear, because whatever the emotion and the behavior that you were having is, because it's an intimacy disorder, every maladaptive behavior is an intimacy disorder. So that fear at the very bottom level, if when you're reading the Bible, if it's just a cognitive piece of information, it is not going to reprocess your memory bank.
Right.
You have to feel the intimacy of God's word to your own heart.
I love that
and
so
you have to
much.
grab the people in your community and bring them close. And when you involve them in that fear, your brain is able to reprocess it at a much faster exponential rate because of the intimacy that your brain is now firing with, where it used to fire with fear, now it's firing with love.
Wow.
That is so awesome. Okay, this may not have anything to do with what we're talking about. But we're talking about this when we got out of the car. And that was the impact music has on your soul.
Yes.
Because it takes you to memories or something that brought you joy or some melancholy or something.
Well, interestingly enough, when we talk about things like music, any spiritual discipline, whether it's prayer, fasting, getting into centering moments where you are just focusing on the Lord, whether you are raising your hands, dancing, we'd go to any of the spiritual discipline expressions. All of them are to be access points to intimacy. When they are done with intimacy as the goal, they have a unique capacity to rewire the brain.
Wow.
So meditating, reading your Bible, prayer, worship, all of that is the goal of having an authentic emotional presence while you're doing them so that they would be the exercises that reprocess your brain.
Yeah.
That's so great.
Yeah, I mean, I've never been the one to jump or run or whatever, but for me, like when the presence of God hit, I am just still. Like that is more me.
Yeah.
And there have been times where you feel that, oh, everybody's running. Maybe I should run. But now I'm to the point where it's like, good for you.
Well,
I'm here right now.
Yeah. And I think in public environments, you've got to know you. That goes back to attunement. But when, I look at, there was a video out after Tim Tebow had lost a football game at the University of Florida. And the next game, he's telling them in the locker room, this is what's going to happen. And he is, he's screaming. He's got them so hyped up. Well, you understand when you do that, you're jumping up and down. You're declaring things with a conviction.
Yeah.
There is no way. And so let me say this. You never feel an emotion. Never do you ever feel an emotion without neurochemicals firing it off in your brain.
Right.
So when you see Tim Tebow doing that, what's happening is all these chemicals are rolling around his brain, and he triggered them to happen. So when you think about like dancing, like Smith Wigglesworth, every morning before the first thing he'd do, he'd dance by his bed. Why did he do that? Well, he learned how to do that where it wasn't performance.
Right.
Apparently he did that because it was regenerative to him. There was an intimacy connection between him and God. Well, when you lift your hands, we do know there is a book called How God Changes the Brain, written by Andrew Newberg from the University of Pennsylvania. He wrote, and he's not even a Christian, and they wrote these things around spiritual disciplines. When you raise your hands, your brain's releasing neurochemicals. And so there isn't anything God is asking of us in our worship to Him that doesn't have a component to the restoration or the restorative process of our souls.
That He designed.
Yeah, so this is an area that people are disputing today in the Word of Faith circles. And that is, are you allowed to believe that you are broken? So here's what I'm on a journey of questioning that I would hope that the listeners could lean in on, and that's the idea that we are growing.
Yeah.
And this idea of transformation is not a miracle one-off.
Right.
It is an entire life. That if we're growing, what are we growing from? And if we are being made perfect, if certainly our spirit is perfect, we're born again, we're a new creature, there's nothing broken or messed up in our spirit. But if you and I are doing things that are triggered from these roots of bitterness, which we are, even if people don't want to call it that, some of the most dysfunctional people I know God pretty good.
It's true.
So if they
I'm one of them.
I was going to say, yours is true.
Well, see. Let's take that.
Right.
If that's true, and we sat here and as we were walking through the model, and you guys were seeing things about yourself, then that would mean that there are things that are in me that are still in process towards growth, transformation, and recovery.
That's right.
So the question is do I believe my brokenness is my eternal condition? Or do I believe that the grace of God is leading me and that I'm growing? So here's an example. When Jesus ministers to the madman of Gadara, he casts the legion out of him. The Bible says that he sat in his right mind. That is a profound thing because there had to be massive trauma in that dude for him to be cutting himself and running around naked and all that he was doing. There had to have been such a miracle on his brain that took place. So the question is, do we really believe that from that day forward, that guy never had any issues in any area of his life? He was just a perfect human? Perfect as in flawless? And if he's not, then is he broken? So we've got to define our terms. What is that? And so for me, I personally don't have a problem. And I know some of my colleagues and great friends would disagree with this. And that's great. I love conversation. But I don't have a problem saying that I'm living and executing through my brokenness. And I'm moving from faith to faith and glory to glory. I'm growing. So as an example, one of my supervisor in my certification program is a guy named Dr. Ted Roberts. Ted is a spiritual son of Jack Hayford. Ted was in his late or mid-70s when he was my supervisor. He was a Vietnam fighter pilot, and he was a Foursquare pastor. So all of that. Now, the International Institute of Trauma and Addiction Professionals, for which he was my supervisor, it is not a Christian organization. It's a secular organization. But he happened to have gone through it, and then I did too. Well, he goes to a weekend of therapy where he is reprocessing memories with truth. And he has some extraordinary times. So I have a meeting with him right after he went on a weekend, and I'm asking him about his weekend. And I said to him, so Dr. Roberts, you've been doing this for like 20 years or longer. I said, is there ever a time that the traumas that you're processing, that they are completely and absolutely forever processed out, 100%? And he said, well, I think that's a bad question. And I said, well, what would be a good question? And he said, I think the question is what is the goal of a Christian? And he said, would it be until Christ be formed in you, until you are like Christ? And I said, yeah, that would be true. He said, well, do you ever get there? And I said, well, not on this side of eternity. And he said, so you're going from faith to faith and glory to glory. And that, for me, that resonates with me. So I do believe that I can admit to my brokenness as long as I don't embrace that this is my final condition, or that I can't grow. What I'm doing is celebrating the grace of God, that what I am today is not what I'm going to be tomorrow.
Thank you. And I think that's probably what frightens most Word of Faith believers or leaders is this concept of if I admit to my brokenness, I'm not giving place to that. But actually, it's not saying I'm staying here. It's saying I recognize this and I'm moving forward. I love that.
That's how I process it.
I think that's indicative of too many of us believers that we don't even want to acknowledge.
You have to deal with those things in order to move past it. You can't just shove it under the rug and keep going. That's how you fail.
And I mean, and it goes back to what Blaine said about I am so far removed, excuse me, from who that person was. But it's not that he's not aware of it or that it's not there. And I loved his description. It was the loudspeaker by his ear 24/7 when he was in the throes of it. And now it's a whisper on the other side of the door. But it's still a whisper.
He said, I can still hear it. And if I were to give place to it, then it would become louder. But
which is so amazing. Really? I mean, that's amazing.
That's huge.
You have been listening to the FCF Leadership Podcast, where our focus is to help you achieve your destiny as a leader. Thank you for joining us today. For more information, visit our website at fcf.org.